Hey everybody, welcome to Dear Frannie. I am your host, Katherine LeBlanc, founder of Franchise Fractionals. I am joined by another Katherine and Garrick today. We are digging into some training and operations questions, and these guys are just top notch in these disciplines. And so I'm excited to continue our conversation. Katherine, I will let you introduce yourself first.
Yep, Katherine Meariman. I work at Smoothie King, oversee training, ops services. Been with the brand and in franchising for 26 years.
And Garrick?
Hi, I'm Garrick Robert, a 16-year franchise veteran. Worked for franchise brands such as Raising Cane's, Smoothie King, Service Master, and now Salad Station. Most of those years have been in operations, and my last year here at Salad Station serving as Vice President of Operations.
Awesome. Excited to dig in with you guys today. But first, we're going to talk about what are you reading? I want to find out what you smarty pants are consuming so that I can maybe mirror some of that success. Katherine, what are you reading right now? Or listening to, or, interesting thing you saw?
Yep. So I have her book. I have not started yet, but I recently saw her at a conference, Cassandra Worthy. She is a change enthusiast, and high energy, a lot of great, one of the better keynote speakers I've seen in a while, to where I was like, oh, I reached out and see if I could get her to come to our conference. But her topic was really about changing the mindset on change, and really has a strategy of change enthusiasm, and really taking when you look at, change comes up, there's a certain level of fear and anxiety that comes up with it. So that, that everyone experiences, but how can you channel those emotions and change them around positively, quickly, versus staying in that one area and kind of becoming paralyzed in the sense that you can't move from it because you're so the what ifs kind of gets you. And how how you can look at it and just get the positive understanding of it to move on and ultimately to growth when you get through the change process. Because someone once said it, one of the consultants we had years ago, they're like, if you don't evolve, you're gonna die on the vine, so you got to keep evolving. And I just always try to keep that same mindset. But her strategy and thinking about it is how you can implement that with others, and how you can just be a positive influence. So that's kind of what I'm looking. I have her book. I need to start it. But Cassandra Worthy, I think she's worth checking out.
That sounds awesome. I mean, the world we live in, right, is managing change management, and how do we get the masses to come along with the changes that we are implementing? So I am writing that down. I can't wait to check that out. Garrick, what are you reading?
So I just finished reading Bob Iger's book. So I wouldn't say it's super current, but The Ride of a Lifetime. And I'm a fan of just Disney World from a business perspective in general, just the level of service and execution, the ability to hit at that level it's just always been very impressive. And I think, we all see it in our careers when you interview somebody right at the store level. If they have Chick-fil-A or Starbucks, you get excited and you probably don't even interview them. You just say hire them. At the higher level, if it says Disney on it, to some extent, you're like, okay, this person was probably trained in some level of service, right? And it's I'm not saying it's always a no-brainer, but it does look great on a resume. But and I think everybody is aware of just the brand and its level of success. But really, it was just his story, his career, which I found very interesting. I mean, he wasn't Ivy League educated. His parents were just regular people. I think his dad was a professor, college professor. Kind of the biggest thing I took away from it, he took advantage of every opportunity that was laid in front of him, and almost always proved himself or hit the ball, or he did something right at every level. And call it fortune, call it being disciplined and trained and well educated. But when you read the story, you come to this understanding that every time he had to prove himself, he did. And maybe it's luck. I don't know, but at some point the luck you would think would run out, and it was just very interesting to see throughout his career. I mean, he just worked really, really hard, took advantage of every opportunity, uh, credits his mentors over and over and over again in the book, which means a lot to me. I mean, I got a lot of mentors in my career that I really am thankful for, because I wouldn't be where I am without them. And I kind of want to continue to do the same in my career, to continue, pass that along and mentor other people. But really a great read from a business standpoint. Anybody leading any type of business organization, his thought processes and how he discerns things and what he takes into consideration, really going through all the critical points of his career, from the acquisition of Pixar, his having a very contentious relationship with Steve Jobs, and flipping that into a relationship where they were best friends just before Steve Jobs passed away, which I think is a great read for anybody working in franchising, how to deal with a tough relationship and turn it into a positive, because if anyone working in this industry hasn't had that happen yet, you will. So you might want to read it just for that perspective. But really, I was fascinated by his story. Seems to me very achievable, right? It's not far-fetched. It's not made up. I think people can read that and go, hey, that's something like I could actually achieve. And I also find it interesting that he wrote that book before he became CEO again. So now there's probably going to be some type of addendum to the book to tell this final chapter, which hasn't been fully written yet. So a few more years, I think, of him being CEO. So I'm interested to kind of continue to follow his career and see how it goes, and also see how the Disney company tracks from here as well.
Awesome. Writing that down for sure. I think, when the takeaway that you had around kind of just taking advantage of every opportunity, I do think that's a discipline. I don't think that's a given. And I think that it takes someone who maybe hasn't had all the opportunities to be able to see them, right? Because I find in life, lots of people are given opportunities, but they're not either they're not seeing them for opportunities, or they're just not taking them. And so I think that's a great insight. I'm definitely going to put that on the book read list. My What Are You Reading is a podcast. I've been listening to a podcast called Think Like an Owner by Alex Bridgman. I've been enjoying it. I feel like it's giving me kind of a college course on kind of the way MBAs are taught. I don't have my MBA, but certainly value that education, and so getting it for free in a 30-minute podcast is great.
That works.
And so I think, for me, it's been challenging. It's a different way of thinking. And so I've really been enjoying kind of seeing that viewpoint. And the guests that he has on are not, necessarily in the franchising industry. And so it's learning about other industries, learning about how other people are approaching business. And it's been an interesting read or listen for me. Okay, so before we get into our question for today, just a quick note from Franchise Fractionals. Dear Frannie is brought to you by Franchise Fractionals. Scaling your franchise doesn't mean going it alone. With Franchise Fractionals, you have access to the top tier talent you need when you need it. From finance to operations and marketing, our fractional executives have been where you want to go. Don't let the full-time commitment of executive roles hold you back. Visit Franchise Fractionals today to discover how our leaders can help pave the way for your franchise's success. So digging into our question today, but the franchisor is asking, we're thinking about engaging experienced franchisees to train new franchisees and developing a mentoring or coaching program. What are some pros and cons to this approach? And I will let Katherine go first because she drew the short straw.
Thanks, Katherine. So one, the mentoring program and coaching program is not something we've implemented yet. I think it is something that has been in talks, in particular with new franchisees coming on board, of how you can make those connections. I do try to connect people in the beginning, like when they first come in for orientation. I'm like, who'd you call on your list? Did you make connections? Oh yeah, I only talked to a couple people or whatnot. And then I'm like, and where are you going? All right, let me connect you with these people over here because I think you could get good insights. So I do try to make connections in the beginning, but we don't have a specific mentoring program set up yet, but I do think it is needed. But that being said, a couple of years ago, we did implement using franchise locations to train other franchisees during that. So we set up certified training stores, CTS programs. We go through a whole, certification process and a validation process. We seek out we ask franchisees to submit their interests first, because we feel like if you want to be a part of it, you'll put your best foot forward versus us coming in and begging you to be a part of it. There might be some begging in there at times, but we do. We have this program in place, and it's been working out really well. Franchisees, brand new franchisees, and even their managers go work in certified training stores over the course of 3 weeks. So week 1's team member, week 2 is team captain, week 3 is like manager fundamentals. And it does work out really well. That mentoring starts taking place there because they'll work with franchisees and their managers, and then they'll kind of have their text group that they start. They're like, oh, I still call her, I still text her just to get their insights. So it's been very good for us. There opportunities, there are some cons with it, is that, perhaps we don't get out as often as we should to validate or revalidate certified training stores. And then when managers change, that comes into play because, franchisee is not always there, and then a manager has changed, and, some things aren't looked at as well as they were, the month prior, because things didn't translate down. So we're implementing some different things over the next year to help us refresh and revalidate with those programs. But overall, it's been very good for us. A few hiccups here and there, where some folks don't mesh well, and we just have to, what we do is really encourage feedback, and like, don't hold out until you come in for week 4 when you're in a classroom setting with us to tell us like, oh yeah, I was miserable the last 3 weeks. Like, tell us in week 1 that, you're standing at the sink washing blender bowls, and you're not really getting anything before it goes on. So we really encourage the feedback loop and try to touch base during those 3 weeks with all the attendees to make sure everybody's getting what they need. But also on the certified training store too, to touch base with them to see how their trainees are going for this month, has also been pretty imperative for us. And then after each session, we do a survey for both sides. So then again, the feedback loop is there, coming back to us, so we can make adjustments as needed before we get there for the next group. So overall, it's been a great program, and just one we are continuing to look to evolve and enhance as we go on.
So I'm curious on that, because, I think a certified training program or training store is a dream, right? Because but I'm curious as to what was the impetus of you guys implementing that? Was there a problem that you were trying to solve by bringing that to life?
Well, one, we were going from a 2-week program to a 4-week program. So previously it was 1 week in store and then 1 week in classroom. So then looking at, we're going to 3 weeks. And then folks are like, well, you want me to go to 3 weeks in Dallas, 4 weeks in Dallas? I live in Ohio. Like, is there no one, close to me that I can go and train with? I know I already talked to her. She said I could come train. So then that kind of was the point of like, yeah, we need them across the country. And then looking at growth, just as we're going into other areas, someone always coming to Dallas doesn't always make sense. And how can we evolve that process? So that's how it kind of came to be, going from 2 weeks to the 4, and then looking at, making it work for folks. Is how we started the program.
And so you said that in that initial startup, you guys had some folks in mind, but you also had an application process.
Yep. So we have an application process, an interest form. You submit, you're interested in becoming a certified training store. Fill out the form. We validate, one, I mentioned scorecard. We look at a scorecard. So how are you doing the things that we need to do? Do you have a great guest service? Are you using the training tools and resources? Things like that. And then also what's your ops visits look like? Are you following systems and processes? Are you source clean? Things like that. And also the interest form was really that we just felt like if people wanted to be a part of it, that they embrace it and engage in the system,
Yep.
versus, like I mentioned, us going out and seeking you.
Mhm.
You know, if we had some stores that they're like, they do really well and people are like, oh, always Catherine does a great job out there. You know, we want to, Catherine, how come you're not a certified training store yet? Oh man, the time I have to put into it and things like that. So just kind of opening up those conversations. There is a monetary thing for folks that a payment for if you're training, depending on the number of trainees you have. We do some payouts for folks, so it's not like we're just you know, expecting it for free. There is a payout,
Right.
and that's, you know, franchisees can help supplement their manager's income or their own if needed.
Okay, interesting. And so Garrick, it looks like you have some questions for
I
Catherine
was going to
too.
ask, yeah, can I use some of my time to ask Catherine a question? So it got me thinking about some things because we're not quite at this level yet, but we have some informal processes that I'll talk about. But when you talked about certifying the store and sometimes the manager's leaving, right? Are you guys still certifying the manager in any way?
So we hope the manager has been a certified manager in
Right.
place, whether they've gone through a 4-week program or have done our online certification, meaning they have
Okay.
worked on the store for a certain number of hours and they use the tools and resources and pass the final per se. So we do certify to that in that regard. And then we go out to the store, whether it's our brand trainer or a field trainer or even an ops consultant is going out to the store and they have their certification checklists and they observe and watch things in action, and actually get trained on some things to understand how someone will be trained in the store. And
Okay.
then as the time goes on, you know, we have our list of certified training stores and our scorecard comes out every period. And we look at it and go, okay, who is perhaps going into the red
Mhm.
versus being into the green, to just monitor what's happening. And then also the feedback also with the ops consultant and ops directors to understand, like, hey, what's happening with this location?
Sure.
Are they still, you know, in a good place, or did some things change?
Yeah.
And that's how we kind of adjust accordingly.
And have you had to take anybody off of that list? And what was that process like?
Yeah. So we have had to take some folks off, and some were that they just weren't, you know, following the tools and resources and really going, you know, you don't have to take inventory every week. I know they tell you to, but you're really, you know, you don't have to. So then it was like, oh, okay. Like, so then we, you know, have conversation and coaching on it. And if that's something they really felt strongly in and didn't want to back down from that belief, then we're like, you know, at this time, we're going to remove you from the certified training store. And some folks will be like, hey, yeah, like I get it. When trainees are in there, I need to follow the line. I'm like, yes, please follow the line. You know, to
Yeah.
make sure that everyone understands what needs to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Managers are there for a reason, right?
That's
Yeah.
right.
No, that's awesome. I took a lot of notes there. Thank you.
Well, Garrick, I think, you know, look at Smoothie King at 1,200 locations, right? And growing, they obviously have some needs that Salad Station hasn't reached yet at 34 locations and growing too. And so I'm curious to
Yeah.
hear, you know, how do you incorporate franchisees into your training process, you know,
Sure.
the veteran ones, and how do you do that?
Yeah, it's the perspective here is very different. I tell people when I worked at Smoothie King, my territory was like 55 stores, right? So my territory there is bigger than the entire brand here. So it is a very interesting perspective, and how we do things here is a little different. I would say not as formalized as Catherine's program, and we really kind of accidentally morphed into what I will call an informal kind of franchisee mentoring program. And what it came out of was the need at the time to allocate a limited amount of resources that we had. So we didn't have a full-fledged training department. I did have one person designated to it. He had one person he was training. And so we had to open stores and also train people to then open their stores. And so to kind of become efficient, what we started doing, even though I had never actually done it in my career, was we started sending new training franchisees to new store openings to learn what it was like to work in a store, but also to see the process that they're about to go
Yeah, I
through.
love that.
And it was interesting. I kind of toiled with that one when it first came up because I had never actually done it before. It was never something that I was experienced with. Just the way my brain works, I naturally thought of all the reasons not to, right?
Right.
And I had those all laid out. I was like, there's a lot of things here that we may not want to experience, but ultimately, our situation just outweighed all of the cons that I could come up with, and we started doing it. So we started sending new franchisee trainees to attend new store openings. Most of the time, it was also geographically beneficial for them. It was oftentimes closer to where they were than traveling to our office. Like Catherine said, that can be a limiter. And while the process is not formal, we don't have like any type of formal application for it. Quite frankly, we're opening that store, so we don't even really know how that process is going to
Right.
go. We haven't even really worked with that franchisee very long, but it actually has proved to be very beneficial for us. We're essentially killing two birds with one stone. And in general, I would say the store that we're opening, uh, before, during, and after, not once has ever objected to this process. And we do try and survey that. We ask permission before. During the process, we check and make sure that there's no issue being caused by it. And after the fact, in our debrief and our sign off of the training, we cover that to say, were there any issues with that? Do you like it, et cetera, et cetera? And never once have we gotten any feedback that that was in the way. And most of the time, we are generally so busy to have the extra hands is quite nice. And that learning under fire and under pressure, we have found to be very beneficial for the franchisee that's attending, and really giving them perspective on what they're about to go through. And
Mhm.
when it is eye-openingly busy, for them to see that and say, oh, wow, I saw everything that that store just went through, including the person who was leading it. Here are some things I probably need to prepare myself for. And
Yeah.
we'll typically review that ahead of time as well. Or coming out of that, the attendee will have more trainings to go through. We typically do 20 in-store shifts and then 5 classroom sessions. So we have some follow-up typically to do after they attend it, and we're fairly flexible. I always joke and say, big brands always make people give up 4 weeks of their lives, Katherine Meariman,
Oh,
but we
there
don't
you
do
go.
that, right? And so I have to have something to sell, right? I don't make you give up 4 weeks of your life. We'll do it at, we do it at your pace. We'd like to do it a week at a time if we can, but we'll take 3 days at a time if that's all we can get. And most of the time we get 100%. Sometimes I get very close and we still have to open the store. So it's just one of the things that you do as a small brand and the resources that you have, like the mentality shift from 1,000 stores to 30 stores is just it's very different. And so this informal mentor program that we've created is it's pretty long standing. I think it happened within my first year here, and now we actually actively look for it. I actually talked about it on my Monday meeting with my team so we have a store that we're opening probably in about 2 weeks, and then we have a store that's opening probably in about 8 weeks. And the 8 week store still is at the very beginning stages of their training. And they will come in for a week of training next week. But I made sure to tell our trainers, let's 100% get them in for when we open this other store. Like, they will need the reps and they will need to see it. And it's close by. So our entire corporate team will be there. So it'll be very advantageous. We'll have full support there, and they'll be able to attend and see everything. So it really does set the second or the attending franchisee up, I think, very well with that perspective, seeing how busy it is, getting there on the first day. Our first days tend to be very, very busy, and for them to see that amount of volume and what it takes to get there, I think does them a great service. Whereas if we tell them about it and they just don't have any perspective on it, and then we open the store and they just get hammered, it can be crushing if you don't have the right mentality. So them seeing it, I think, is very, very beneficial. So there are probably still some cons with the process, but I think they're far outweighed by the benefits. We haven't had any issues with personalities or conflicts. Generally, everybody's very happy, in a good mood. Franchisee who owns the store is excited to get things going, and then the one who's there attending is excited to be learning hands-on in a live environment. So we have yet to run into any issues with that process.
I love that. And I love it for a number of reasons. And the two big ones are you're releasing some stress from the franchisee that's training, because now you've given them a view of what to expect.
Mhm.
And most of our stress comes from the unknown, right? And worrying over things that we can't control, or we don't know what's going to happen. And so you've alleviated some of that from the get-go by having them attend another store's opening, and not just attend, but work it. And then the other piece that I love about it is that it's culture building. And it's culture building with teamwork, with franchisees learning from each other, and getting their hands dirty with each other. And it sets them up for success as far as relationship building. And I know we've been part of, in the brands that we have been part of, we see where if franchisees are not working together, that can be detrimental to the work that you're trying to get done. And so starting that off on the right foot is an awesome culture building moment. So that's a hot tip I saw Katherine writing down.
I did write that down, Garrick. I love it.
What?
I love it. I'm like, I can't wait to call my team afterwards and go, guess what? I think
You learned something from us. What?
I always.
I did want to circle back to the mentor-mentee relationship and how to set that up. And I know, Garrick, you said you kind of had this informal thing going with the new store openings, and Katherine, you said, you're thinking about doing it. And I just wanted to put my 2 cents in the mix. Not that I have an answer for it, but I did listen to folks who I've heard do this in the past, because I've seen it done with varying levels of success, I guess is my point. And, oftentimes we see it implemented when locations are not doing well, and we're trying anything and everything to build them up. And so that's where I see a lot of these mentor-mentee relationships, attempts happen. And one insight that I heard about was really, insightful to me, as far as when you set that up, when you set up a mentor-mentee relationship because something's wrong with the mentee, it sets it off on the wrong foot, and it can doom the program from the start. And so instead, setting up some things that are a bit more organic. And so, Garrick, I think that the program that you guys have, right, is a little bit more organic. Katherine, with your certified training stores, that's a little bit more organic, of folks who are doing the right thing, creating relationships, and then if they click, and they continue talking as they go on, versus a formalized program where people feel like, they're forced into this mentee position that might be of a lesser than. So just some insights. I've not yet seen a mentor-mentee program really done well yet. Not to say that there's not out there, I just haven't seen it. And I think that insight of you got to set it up in a way that doesn't make people feel lesser than was really impactful to me, at least.
Yep. Yeah, that would be a very tough thing to have the conversation, like, hey, I'm going to set you up with this person because you're really not good at this and they're really good at it, right? And so you can't really say that conversation. But that reminds me of a story back when I worked at Smoothie King. I had the benefit of consulting the very first franchisee of Smoothie King, and we did not start off on the right foot. I visited her store, and there were some pretty big violations, and long story short, we turned that around very quickly, and she actually became a very good friend, actually somebody I still talk to today. But I was, as the first franchisee, she learned a very old system of the brand, and I was really struggling to get her to understand the current way we were doing things. And it occurred to me, and this was not a formal program, nobody had ever done it. I had actually never done it in my entire consulting career. It's like, I just have to show her what I want this store to do. And so we had opened a brand new store in New Orleans, and it was doing great. It was extremely well run, high energy, drive-through store, just like it was checking all the boxes, and great manager running it. It's like, I just need her to see this. And so I went and asked my boss one day, I was like, would you have a problem if instead of doing my visit, if I just picked her up and drove her to the other store and said, here's all the things I want you to do? He said, yeah, do it. That's a great idea. And it had never occurred to me that that was available for me to do. We had never talked about it in a meeting. It was never a tool that we had actively promoted. And look, I don't know if she's how her store is operating today. But I will tell you, in the moment, it was very eye-opening for her. It was an epiphany of grand proportions, and it set our future conversations and follow-up visits off on a much better foot. So it's something I would encourage if that doesn't exist in your operations department. But essentially, all we're talking about there is taking a mentee and attaching them to a mentor, right? It's a great tactic and a great tool to consider using, I think.
That's great. And good point. The other thing Katherine said about organically got me thinking about, we do our conference every year, right? So we've been trying to do a better job of putting franchisees out there, make them a part of the process. So you showcase different franchisees that are doing, whether it's catering or outstanding guest service or culture within their store. So they're out there on a panel or part of a breakout or something. So then it's like, hey, I want to talk to them. So then folks are going up to them afterwards and going like, hey, you said this, I want to know more. And then they just start building their own relationship and rapport. And to your point earlier, Katherine, if they mesh, they mesh and they continue on. So I think that has been something that's been helpful too. And we saw this in particular, this last conference this year, we had quite a few franchisees out there that we, showcased and had them part of the discussion, and, the relationships I think have grown. And then the other piece is just in training classes, like they have folks that have built, from their cohort, they've stayed connected, text message groups, and now they meet up every year at conference. You're going to be there. We're going to dinner. Let's go. And they have their connection because they meet once a year, and they just keep it going and keep that text group going throughout when things happen or they need help with. So that's, an informal kind of mentorship program that they just do on their own. That has, I think, worked out well.
And I think to both of y'all's points, it doesn't necessarily have to be a overall mentor, right? Like you can find people who are good at specific things that you can elevate. I've heard of at conferences, folks having like, marketing superstar, catering superstar, like on their badges. And so people can, you have that on your badge. Now you might have to give one to everybody. So you got to figure out what they're a superstar of. But, they have it on their badges so that if they, because there's only so many panels you can have, at least a conversation starter when they're at their roundtables. Awesome.
I wrote that down too.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So 34 badges is probably easier than 1,200.
Right.
I don't know how you're going to do that one.
Right.
See, pros and cons. Sometimes small is better.
Right.
Awesome. All right. Well, this has been a terrific conversation. Thank you guys again for your time. And thank you listeners for listening to this episode of Dear Frannie. If you have a question for our podcast, please email us at hello@franchisefractionals.com. Thank you guys. Have a great day.